Everyone, welcome to International Women's Day. Thank you for coming today. We have two fantastic guests. Actually, let me share my screen immediately. With me. Yes. So today we have Suw Carman-Anderson and Anna Nobel from our alumni groups. So we are super excited to hear about career and their story and Q&A, and please stay after for networking. So in general, we want to talk about women and career. So women are less likely to study STEM subjects in general and in higher education. They're most likely to feel that they aren't able to apply for jobs in data as they lack the required qualifications. So today we are very lucky to have Suw Carman-Anderson, founder of Ada Lovelace Network, which raises the profiles of women in STEM, talk to us about her non-so-traditional career path. So I'm very looking forward to hear that, and the benefits of having a wide range of experiences during your professional career. We are also joined by Data School alumni star Anna Nobel, who will join Suw for a Q&A. Anna also got into working with data from a less than conventional for technology background. Now I want to talk 1 second about our program, the Data School. To open in New York, we are in Germany, and of course we are in the UK. As I said before, women are less likely to study STEM subject in higher education. They are more likely to feel they are able to apply for jobs, as I said before, for the required qualifications. But at the Data School, we recruit from a wide range of backgrounds. What we are looking for is your passion for data, not your background, your willingness to learn. So really, we don't look for existing technical skills. We're gonna teach you everything. What we want is really your willingness to learn and your passion. Anyone really should feel like they can apply. And we are going to open in June, as I said, in New York. And if you're interested, please stick around after the event and we can talk extensively about the program. Suw has been so many things, and she's gonna talk about this in the next 30 minutes. And Anna as well, she has done lots of jobs before starting the career in data. So please, Suw, come on stage.
Hi, everyone. Hi, lovely. Thank you, Bene, for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here. Let me just share my slides. Lovely, thank you. Yes, really lovely to be here, and I'm always happy to talk about my career, because I think it's really important that we think about careers kind of slightly differently, that we think about careers in a more sort of human way. So what I'm going to do today really is talk about what I do now with Ada Lovelace Day and the Finding Ada Network. And then we're going to take a little trip back in time, and I'm going to explain how I got here. Because as you probably gathered already, my career has not been straightforward. And I think, understanding how real careers unfold allow us to put our own experience into a broader context, and think about it more realistically. So Ada Lovelace Day is a global celebration of the achievements of women in science, technology, engineering and maths, which I started back in 2009. It's held every year on the second Tuesday of October, which this year is the 11th, so put that in your diary. And our aim is to raise awareness of the amazing work that has been and is being done by women in STEM. And through doing that, we hope to create new role models that will inspire girls to study and pursue a career in STEM. And we also want to provide support to women who are already working in STEM. Now, role models are extremely important. Psychologist Penelope Lockwood discovered that women need female role models more than men need male role models. And she said, outstanding women can function as inspirational examples of success, illustrating the kinds of achievements that are possible for the women around them. They demonstrate that it is possible to overcome traditional gender barriers and indicate to other women that high levels of success are indeed attainable. And I think this is possibly, one of the most important messages that that I have ever stumbled across. Because when we think about what a role model is, the dictionary says it's a person looked to by others as an example to be imitated. So if we are encouraging people to talk about the work of women in STEM, and the women who've inspired them, then we can create new role models that will support the new generation and actually the current generation in STEM. So at Ada Lovelace Day, we've been creating role models through a variety of different activities, which I'm just going to go through a few of them. We've done a lot more than this, but our main work really has been Ada Lovelace Day Live. So this is a fun evening event in London that we would normally run in a non-plague year, where women from across the STEM landscape give a 10-minute talk about their work or their research. And it's all in a theatre-like setting. We have a cash bar, it's very relaxed. So you can come and have a fun evening out and learn stuff from a bunch of women in the process. In 2011, we saw our first independent events, and this now happens every year. Since 2011, we've had 871 events in 239 towns and cities in 41 different countries around the world. And each one of these events is a person or a group of people who are working to raise the profile of women in their own way, in their own community. So it has become this global movement. We've also produced a variety of posters that illustrate the different career paths that are available in STEM, and some that try to explode the myths around careers, like, there's this idea that all a scientist ever does is look down a microscope, or that the only careers in tech are for computer programmers. And so we're really trying to illustrate how broad STEM is, how many different kinds of career you can have in STEM. And we've also got a couple of posters about women in STEM, obviously Ada Lovelace herself, and also paleontologist Mary Anning. That's something I really want to do a lot more of in the future. But given the lack of almost total lack of good female role model toys available for small children, I also developed 3 crochet patterns. Astronaut Dr. Mae Jemison, shark biologist Dr. Eugenie Clark, and physician Dr. Anandabai Joshi. So again, that's something I want to expand, because it's so important to reach girls at a very young age and show them that they can be anything they want to be. We've published 2 books looking at the life and works of different women in STEM, Passion for Science and More Passion for Science. And then during the pandemic, we've done a lot of work online. We've organized webinars, we've produced 2 big online conferences, each with a global reach, so spanning 3 days. We moved Ada Lovelace Day online with a 50-hour-long content extravaganza, because it turns out that due to a strange kink in the international dateline, any single day on Earth lasts for 50 hours. And so we've celebrated women in STEM, the organizations that support them, books written by or about women in STEM, podcasts by women in STEM, and just really trying to highlight all of this amazing work that's being done by women globally, to talk about their work, their research, and to sort of lift others up. Another big project of ours is the Finding Ada Network, which is our mentoring program for women in STEM. This is a program where we connect mentors and mentees, and we support them through their mentoring scheme, whether that's 12 months, 6 months, or 1 month. We guide mentors and mentees through a structured program. We support them with monthly webinars around topics like setting goals, improving their mentoring skills, understanding how to make good habits. We provide them with content around careers, professional skills, personal growth. And I'm always available to provide one-to-one advice and support, particularly for new mentors who may not have done this before. Again, our aim here really is to try and keep women in STEM and to demonstrate that there is this support structure for women, that you do not have to go it alone. So that's a very brief overview of what I do right now. That's kind of like the shape of my job. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about how I got here, a little bit about how I actually talk about my own work, and what impact that might have on others and how they view my career. So you've probably already realized I run my own business, and that summary of my current work is really only a partial snapshot. I haven't mentioned all the admin I do, all the emails, the accounting, client outreach, client support, all of the other things that are involved in running your own business. And that's kind of, that's quite normal. Because when we talk about our careers, we are kind of inventing them every time we talk about them, both in terms of the stories that we tell, and we're inventing our career as we go along, you know, what we're doing to create that career. And the story of any career begins really with the term itself. So when you hear the word career, you probably think of its meaning as a noun. An occupation undertaken for a significant period of a person's life with opportunities for progress. But it does have another meaning, one that is slightly less often used, and that is career as a verb. And this means to move swiftly and in an uncontrolled way. Now, when I think about my career, I do have to say it is a lot more verb than noun. So when I was writing this talk, I tried to map my career out, and it all got quite messy. It starts quite sensibly. I studied geology at Cardiff University, then I got a job in science publishing. Then it kind of goes a little bit weird. I left my science publishing job and ended up working for a music school where I'd been having bass guitar lessons. And while I was there, the owner asked me if I could somehow get a puff piece about the school into the Melody Maker, which used to be a weekly music newspaper. I tried quite hard-ish, but I didn't manage to get that piece in. But I did get to know one of the editors, and I managed to convince him to let me write as a freelance journalist. And my first commission was actually to interview Blur's crew about all of their equipment. I was a big Blur fan at the time, so this was like really exciting for me. So I quit my music school job, became a music journalist instead. Seemed like a really good idea at the time, but it turned out that it was actually quite a bit harder than it looked. And after 2 years of not a huge amount of work, I decided that I quite liked eating, being warm, and paying the rent. So I moved into web design. It was the late 90s. If you knew HTML, you could get work as a web designer, and that's what I did. I taught myself HTML, got some experience freelancing, got some bigger contracts, and it was all going really, really well until the dot-com crash of 2001. And overnight, my web design skills went from in demand to completely unsaleable. And I was out of work for 9 months. So after that, I did what anyone would do, and I tried to turn a hobby into a business by creating an online Welsh language learning service. That didn't really work out. So I took another hobby, blogging, and I turned that into a business instead. So for 10 years, I worked mostly with social technologies with a little sideline in activism, co-founding the Open Rights Group in 2005 and Ada Lovelace in 2009. I think we are getting a sense that this is not a standard career path. But when people talk about their careers, they give us just the edited highlights. They leave out the bits that didn't go so well or that don't feel relevant anymore. And I do too. So if you were sharp-eyed, you will have noticed I put comedian as a sort of offshoot of my career. Again, this was kind of mid-90s. Comedy was the new rock and roll. I was excited about a career on stage, but the truth is I actually only managed 4 gigs. It turned out that even a 5-minute open mic slot was utterly terrifying. Not so scared of public speaking now, but back then it was paralyzing. That said, my gigs went quite well up until the fourth, where I just died on my feet in front of 250 people at a comedy club in Hammersmith. I never booked another gig after that. Generally speaking, I don't mention that when I'm talking to people about my career or writing a biography for an event. There is actually quite a lot that either gets edited out or glossed over. So this kind of complicated, glorious mess becomes a much smaller mess. So you might read my biography and walk away thinking I had some kind of grand plan for my career, which I calmly and efficiently executed. But that is just not true. My professional life has been somewhat haphazard, had quite a few cul-de-sacs and about turns. And I think actually that's the case for a lot more people than would care to admit it. You know, what we get out of career summaries, out of interviews and biographies and profiles and Q&As and lectures is a picture of a very carefully edited career that reflects not just the best bits of our lives, but the expected bits. So I take this mess and I turn it into this, which makes a lot more sense. And it even appears to show some evidence of a deliberate progression from scientist to science publishing, to tech journalism, to technologist, to advocate for women in science, technology, engineering, and maths. There's kind of a flow there that looks as if I had some sense of purpose, rather than thrashing my way randomly through a series of unexpected events. So this kind of neatly sculptured career story is what interviewers and supervisors and strangers at parties expect of us, but it's not the truth. It has a sense of truthiness about it, but it's a construction. When we discuss our professional selves, we are aware that other people expect our careers to make sense, so we adjust our reality to make it all look neat and tidy. What we're often doing is post-hoc rationalization. We're looking for a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. A story we can tell that others will understand without needing further data. We fit the facts into the template that we're all familiar with so that we can meet the expectations of the people around us. So we don't mention that time we took a job, not because it was the best step forward, but because it was the only one we were offered. We don't mention that we left a good job and ended up temping for a while because that was not a sensible thing to do, but because our boss drove us crazy and it was only a matter of time before we were going to get fired anyway. And that's fine, so long as we're honest with ourselves and remember that the career, as we describe it to others, is a story, a construct. Another kind of construct that we create is the origin story. Now, in comics, the origin story is the backstory of a character which explains how they got their superpowers or how they became a supervillain. It's almost always revealed to the reader long after the character has already become established. When it comes to your career, your origin story is that description of the moment in your life when you became inspired to study a particular subject or follow a particular career path. Often it's described as an epiphany in childhood when you realized what you were going to be when you grew up. Now, origin stories don't become important to us until a long time after they've happened. You never recognize them as a key turning point at the time. And if a career doesn't pan out, then the origin story becomes irrelevant and is forgotten. Had I become the world famous geologist that I assumed I would become when I was like 14, I would have had a great origin story. As a kid, I used to go up onto the heath by our house and find all these flint nodules, all different colors. There were blue ones and pink ones and green ones and blue ones. And I was absolutely fascinated by them. I used to collect them and keep them with all the pretty stones that I'd found on holiday in Cornwall. My dad had this Reader's Digest Atlas of the World, which had this double-page spread on the Earth's treasures. And I was absolutely obsessed with it. I just read it over and over again, and I stared at the pictures, and I wished I could own gemstones like these. This, I decided, was what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be surrounded by rocks that were pretty and sparkly. That is one truth. There is another truth, and that is that I knew I wanted to do some sort of science, and that would probably be chemistry, because I liked chemistry. I wanted a science that functioned on a human scale, not on the quantum scale or the universal scale. I wanted something that I could observe mostly with the naked eye. And I also wanted a science where there was still a lot to be discovered. So it felt like all the easy stuff in physics had been kind of done. Maths, not very good at maths. Biology, too squishy. So I kind of narrowed it down to geology. Did a 1-year GCSE just to kind of test drive it. Decided I liked it, decided it was easy, and that was my degree. That was what I was going to do. Now, both of those stories are true. One, though, is quite a bit more romantic than the other. And if I was a journalist, I know which one I'd choose to include in a profile. Now, some people do have a genuine moment of insight when they discover their passion, and that is wonderful. If you've had that flash of inspiration and you followed it through to find that the thing you loved at age 5 is the same thing you love at 25, and that's the same thing that you love at 45, then fantastic. But the problem arises when people use origin stories as a way of establishing credibility and legitimacy through longevity. They say, I am authentic, I am legitimate because I've been doing this since forever. This can actually be an attempt to devalue and undermine the work of anyone who doesn't have that kind of origin story or who came to a particular subject or career later in life. So it is really important to understand that not having an origin story doesn't make you any less good at what you do. It has nothing to do with your passion, your abilities, or your chances of success. Origin stories are just as truthy as professional biographies and career summaries. But there is a deeper reason why it's important to understand the mess that is the truth of people's professional lives. We are creatures who depend on stories to make sense of our world. The stories that we hear about others, the stories we tell about ourselves, these all influence how we understand the world around us and how we think about our place in it. So if we only read highly polished accounts of other people's careers, we start to develop unrealistic expectations about how we should experience our own professional lives. But that's like reading the final published version of To Kill a Mockingbird and forgetting that it started out as a very bad first draft, and it took Harper Lee 3 years of rewrites and revisions to finish. When we compare our lived experiences to other people's edited highlights, of course our rough and ready life is going to look bad. So we have to learn not to make that comparison, not to beat ourselves up because we're not a startup billionaire at 25, a Nobel laureate at 35, and a famous TV personality by 45. Because plenty of people take a while to work out what they want to do. And careers can have phases. Some people radically change their focus, sometimes quite late in life. Indeed, Inés Mexia was a Mexican-American botanist who gathered 150,000 plants, flowers, and leaves over the course of her career. She collected 500 specimens on her very first expedition, which was the same number that Darwin collected on his voyage on the Beagle. Her collection included 500 species that were new to science, and she's had 50 species named after her. 84 years after her death, scientists are still working on and learning from her collections. Yet Mexia did not start studying botany until she was 51. Queen guitarist Brian May took 37 years to finish his doctoral thesis, a survey of radial velocities in the zodiacal dust cloud, an astrophysics thesis. He became a PhD on the 14th of May 2008 at the age of 60. But he has nothing on British-Australian actress and politician Liz Kirkby, who in 2014 became Australia's oldest PhD graduate at the age of 93. Her thesis was on unemployment during the Great Depression. Over time, the stories that we read about others change the stories we tell ourselves, stories about what we've done, who we are, what we're capable of. And these are the most important stories of all. They shape our actions in the present because we can only prepare for the future that we can imagine. So as they say, if you can't see it, you can't be it. If you don't know that a certain career choice exists, you can't choose it. So for example, I remember the moment I realized there are people in this world whose job it is to taste chocolate. and I wonder why my careers advisor at school never mentioned it. How might my life be different now if I'd realized as a teenager that people taste chocolate for a living? If I'd read about what life is like as a chocolate taster, about how chocolate is made, about the chemistry and physics that makes chocolate either shiny and snappy or dull and gritty. It might be tempting to put this down as a failure of my own imagination, but in actual fact, it's got a lot more to do with the almost complete absence of interesting role models, and particularly female role models, that I was exposed to as a child, as a teen, and a young woman. I mentioned role models earlier, and this is why they are so important. There are so many women with remarkable and fascinating stories that show us just what we can do, who teach us that we can overcome major challenges in order to be successful, and show us we do have it in us. And indeed, reading so many different stories of women in STEM has really driven home to me just how varied people's lives really are. This idea that there's like a standard career path that we all imagine is actually not what most people, and especially most women, experience, because life is never that straightforward. So Tianxiong Wu, a Chinese nuclear physicist in America during World War II, who was for 8 years completely cut off from her family in China. Wu solved Enrico Fermi's plutonium chain reaction problem, realizing the buildup of xenon, the plutonium fission byproduct, was capturing the neutrons needed to sustain the reaction. Through her work on beta decay, she came to work with two other theoretical physicists, Sung Dao Li and Chen-Ning Yang, on the question of whether something called the law of conservation of parity always held true. At that point, that law was as well established as gravity, but there were doubts. Wu designed an experiment to test it, found that parity was not always conserved, and also proved that the tau meson and the theta meson were the same particle. Li and Yang got a Nobel Prize for the work, Wu did not. And there's Wilhelmina Fleming, the Scottish woman who moved to Boston with her husband. After just 2 years of marriage at the age of 23, her husband deserted her, leaving her with their young child in a strange country with no money and nowhere to live. She'd been a teacher in Scotland and had ended up taking a job as maid to Edward Pickering, a professor at the Harvard College Observatory. Pickering eventually promoted her to work on the identification of stars captured on photographic plates, and by the end of her career, she had catalogued over 10,000 stars, discovered 310 variable stars, 10 novae, 52 nebulae, and the hot, dense stars known as white dwarfs. She also discovered the Horsehead Nebula and helped develop a system for cataloguing stars that is still in use today. And then, of course, there's Ada Lovelace herself, my favourite woman in STEM. Born in 1815, she was the first person to publish what we would today call a computer program, which was a set of instructions to run on Charles Babbage's analytical engine that would calculate Bernoulli's numbers. But more than that, Lovelace recognized that the implications of Babbage's calculating machine, and in her 1843 paper, she explored ideas that we have still yet to make real. She realized that if she only knew how to program it, the analytical engine could create art or compose music, and we are only now, with machine learning, starting to see computers creating wholly new images and pieces of music. Lovelace was a visionary who was more than 150 years ahead of her time. And the lesson to take from this is that if she can, I can. The more we surround ourselves with stories like these, the more varied and unusual these stories we choose to read are, the more we can draw strength and inspiration from other women. And even better, the more likely we are to be able to imagine an unusual and interesting future for ourselves. And these days, we do need to be able to depart from the stereotypical idea of what a career should be. The economy has changed dramatically over the last 50 years. There is no guarantee you will find a clear career path that takes you neatly from job to job to job. Instead, we're increasingly seeing people developing what's often called a portfolio career. So this is like people who have several related or even unrelated jobs, like photographer and journalist, or people who hold a different types of job, like employee and freelancer. We also see people switching jobs more frequently than they used to. The old job for life has gone, and people often need to find a new employer in order to progress their careers. Mine is a portfolio career. I've been an employee, a freelance, and a business owner. When I was a music journalist, I was often also the photographer, taking photos at the same time as producing all the words. But if we look more closely, we can spot 4 key areas of expertise: science, journalism, technology, and activism. All of the jobs that I've had focus on these areas of interest and on 3 related skill sets: analytical skills, editorial skills, and technological skills. Running Ada Lovelace Day requires all 3 of those things. But this kind of career is not unusual amongst my peers. I particularly see people in tech and journalism switching between full-time jobs and being a freelance consultant. Sometimes a period of freelancing is inevitable because either you get made redundant or a job doesn't work out. That's common in journalism, or because a startup has run out of money, which is common in tech. So it really is about being prepared. It's about developing the skills you have that lend themselves to other fields of endeavor, regardless of your industry. Understanding and developing related skill sets gives you strategic flexibility. If you need to change career direction, you can. As industries changed and the economy ebbs and flows, you need to be able to turn on a dime. And if you have a variety of skills, you have the ability to swiftly adapt to a changing situation. And developing multiple skill sets is not just economically useful, it also expands your horizons. It gives you experiences that you might otherwise miss out on. A portfolio career can enable some really interesting choices that you just wouldn't otherwise have. So, for example, my geology degree meant that I had an interest in volcanology. And so when Eyjafjallajökull erupted in 2010, I followed it really, really closely. I set up a wiki to archive all the links of the coverage online from all sorts of sources. And then when Chatham House, which is a think tank in London, started researching the impact of the ash cloud on civil society and business, they found my wiki, found me, and after a few conversations, I ended up researching the media coverage and contributing a chapter to their report on high impact, low probability events. In 2011, I worked with my husband on a major news website launch for the largest media network in India, Network 18. So that required analytical skills to understand the needs of the client and their audience and to develop strategies, technological skills to advise on the best content management platform and design the social interaction architecture, and editorial skills, not just to create the documentation that we would give to our client as the deliverable from the project, but also to run their tech section, which myself and my husband did for 9 months until they got the permanent team in. So in my experience, interesting things happen around the boundaries between disciplines. For me, being analytical is useful, but having strong editorial skills and an understanding of technology has opened more doors than simply being analytical by itself would have. It's at the boundaries where you can not just make up your own career path, you can make up your own job. Back in 2004, I was in a bit of a pickle. I'd enjoyed being a journalist in the late 90s, and then I'd enjoyed building websites until the dot-com crash had put an end to that and put me out of work again. So I was writing a lot of blog posts, as the underemployed often do. And then that May, a company got in touch with me saying that they were looking for a writer, specifically a blogger, to write a promotional blog for them. Looking at their product and their market, though, I could see that there was a problem. They were a snack food company, although none of these, and they wanted to market their snacks to school kids. School kids did not read blogs at the time. Pretty sure school kids are not reading blogs now. And worse than that, snack foods are just unbelievably dull to write about. There really is a very small amount of things you can say about a snack. So the project was doomed to failure. So I offered to discuss the problems. They invited me up to their offices for a meeting, and I went through every issue in turn. And by the time I'd finished, I had talked them out of starting a blog to promote this product, and basically talked them out of offering me a job that I actually really needed. But they were honorable. They paid me for my time as a consultant. And I realized that here was a job that hadn't existed before. So I invented for myself the job title blog consultant, which does sound quite twee now, but back then sounded really quite interesting. And up until 2015, I worked with household brands around the world on the different uses of social media, from building relationships with customers to internal collaboration. I've worked with startups to design social functionality for web products. I've worked with NGOs, nano businesses, publishers, authors to kickstart their use of social media. And although I wasn't the only one working in that area back in 2004, there really were no more than a dozen of us worldwide doing what I was doing. So there was no one to say to me, hey, Suw, you should totally do some consulting around this new type of technology. Actually, most people I knew who were mostly web and software developers just were really dismissive. And they were just like, oh, blogging's really simple. No one will ever need it explained to them. But it turns out that actually not everyone is quite that tech savvy, and that there was indeed a need. When it came to activism, it was again a case of kind of making it up as I go along. In 2005, I got really interested in some EU legislation around data retention. And at a conference called Open Tech, a group of us decided to put together a new NGO. And through a combination of availability and helpful naivety, I ended up as a co-founder and the first executive director of the Open Rights Group. So by the end of my tenure, we'd created a non-profit company limited by guarantee. We'd campaigned alongside European activists against data retention, drawn up a detailed submission to the Gowers Review of Intellectual Property, which I was part of the team that gave evidence in Parliament about that. And I established org as a frequent voice in the news on digital issues. It was an amazing and educational experience. And it really taught me how to think on my feet and how to use social media to have an impact far larger than our tiny group could otherwise manage. Making up jobs is now a key skill, no matter what field you're in. The pace of change is such that it is impossible to predict what will be invented next, and even harder to predict how that will affect the jobs market. Robots have transformed the manufacturing industry, making some jobs obsolete, but the miniaturization of computers and sensors has created a whole new remote sensing industry that simply could not have existed before. So to invent your own job, you need to be willing to take a leap into the future, to find the cutting edge and to live there, to explore the boundaries. You don't have to be a software developer to see how technology can be used to create new and exciting career opportunities. In fact, it is more important to understand the art of the possible, to see what new technology allows you to do that you couldn't do before. We can do so much more with data now than we could even a few years ago. And the possibilities for how that is going to develop in the future is endless. And that means that now, more than ever, we are having to make our careers up out of whole cloth because that change is happening so quickly. But regardless of how things do change, there is one truth that does remain. Whenever we hear other people's tales of their careers, we are getting truthiness, not truth. So as you think about your own experiences, it's important to remember not to compare your first draft to somebody else's published novel. Focus on what you can make possible for yourself and invent your own amazing career. And I hope that your career will be more noun than verb. Thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure.
Inspiring, Suw. I mean, yeah, I've heard you before, but honestly, you're always super inspiring. And please let's welcome Anna. Anna, if you switch on your camera and your mic, you'll be able to come on stage. Let's see. Let's have a few questions. I have a few questions as well, as usual. Let me help Anna think. Yeah. Maybe can someone help Anna? Maybe there is a problem on her video. So just while we wait for Anna, can I start with one question?
Of course.
So, couple things which are so like while you're talking, that's so much resonating on my early career, but in general, are two big biases in general. One is, as you said, in the early everything. So you need to know everything while you're already a uni. You should know the right degree. You should know the company you're working for. Like it needs to be so clear in your mind, especially in your 20s, your path. And it's something that I always perceive as very limiting approach, because obviously you're talking that exists or will exist. As you said, you have done jobs which 10 years before didn't exist, or the year after, as you said, that the early 2000 it just blew. So the world changes constantly. Our passion evolves, our knowledge evolves, the people we surround that we get inspired from evolve all the time. So what's the point really? Why there is this obsession? I'm just thinking about fashion. He would like to have everything figured out. What is this fear of uncertainty? And instead of being something exciting for the future, why is it so scary, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think this actually comes from a couple of things. Firstly, adults who cannot help themselves, who ask small children, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's a really bad question to ask a child. It really puts the onus on, what job do you want to have? It's so much better to ask a child, what do you enjoy? What do you love doing? And getting them to think about their lives in terms of what they enjoy, and in terms of kind of potentially as they get a little bit older, thinking about what skills that involves. So, we're so conditioned throughout our lives to think about what are we going to be when we grow up. And that, I think, then leads to this sense that, well, everyone expects me to know what job I'm going to have, so I need to know this. And then it starts to get a little bit into sort of control freakery, that the sense is that you're supposed to have everything planned out and have a career map and understand, like you say, all the details of it. Because by the time we're getting into university, we've spent a good 10 years of our lives with people asking us, what are you going to be when you grow up? And it's not okay to say, I don't know. That's really frowned upon. If you're a small kid, I don't know. It's like, well, you're going to have to make a decision at some point. You're going to have to make a decision for your GCSEs. You're going to have to make a decision for university. And that's not true. You can change your mind about these things. Changing your mind is a perfectly legitimate thing to do. But also, it just really puts a lot of pressure on people to feel that they have to know what's going on and what they're going to do. And because there are so many examples of people who say they know what they want to do, that you feel like you're behind if you don't.
Exactly.
And ultimately, it's this confection that is just a social construction that just kind of comes out of this whole, what do you want to be when you grow up? These days my answer is, well, I don't want to grow up. I reserve the right to change my career again at any point, because maybe I won't want to do Ada Lovelace Day forever. Maybe changes come that mean that I can't do it forever, and I'm all right with that, because ultimately I have done so many weird and interesting things that I value the flexibility of being able to say, you know what, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 10 years' time. And I'm actually quite comfortable with that. So I think a lot of this is about, there's a tension between the amount of change that we see happening and how rapidly the economy and technology is changing. And then this feeling, we've been taught that we should have control over it all. I think it's much better Absolutely. To admit we don't. And
Absolutely.
That's okay.
Absolutely. And as you said, and I said before, I think it's very limited approach, because he actually closing doors in the most in the field of life where actually you should be. I always tell everyone, I give one piece of advice, like be a sponge, because you don't know at some point. Maybe you absorb and then you're gonna filter what's useful for you and what is not. And I think this reflects a lot in recruitment as well, because do you think, given we expect us to have a straightforward career, do you think while you do recruitment and in any recruitment process, people with a very amount of experience with different sort of penalized compared to people that are straightforward career, like internship? For example, in our case, like we don't recruit in this way, but I have done several interviews when I came to the UK, and for example, not having, I've studied finance, internship in finance, and then a first experience in finance, second experience in finance, basically means, you're less than other candidates, whereas other experience should actually be seen as an enrichment of the position. Do you think this bias is reflected in the recruitment as well a lot?
Totally. I actually think that there are a lot of problems with the way that companies are doing recruitment these days. And part of that is because there are just, jobs that they're getting thousands of applicants, and companies don't know how to handle that. So they turn to algorithmic sorting. And if your CV doesn't have the right terms in it, then you don't even get looked at by a real human being. And I think that's problematic. I think the other thing is that, and this is a very gendered thing, that women are judged so much more harshly, particularly if they have had to take time away from their career in order to care for children or elderly relatives. And
so much.
I kind of hope, last year we talked about the impact of the pandemic, and I kind of hope that one of the lasting changes that might come from this is the understanding that people's careers get interrupted for all sorts of reasons, and it has no bearing on their capacity and their skills and their capability. And I'd like to see HR departments looking more towards an art of the possible approach to hiring, rather than what has been done. And again, there's a gendered difference in this. So men are more often hired for their potential, and women are hired for what they've done in the past. And so that makes it harder for women because they haven't done as much. So, it's really something where we need to start picking apart some of the biases and the out of date thinking in HR practice.
Absolutely. And also that's why it's so important to have a representative panel, because if you have one panel with just straight men, white, obviously, because you're going to have one view. One question from Lena. How did Suw become so imaginative and experimental about her own path? What role models did she have?
So
share it with us.
My career has been a career of necessity in many ways. I didn't set out to have a weird and interesting and imaginative career. I honestly thought at one point, right, I'm going to be a geologist, and I wanted to work in labs, and I wanted to kind of do so I wanted to work with, I love machinery and making things work and all the rest of it. And that just didn't happen. And so, in all honesty, the majority of my career has been working out, okay, this thing for whatever reason hasn't worked. I need to find something else. What might that other thing be? How can I use my skills in a way that is in demand right now? And so it has been kind of really making it up as I go along. And I think it is important to stress that, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I have quite often just been flying by the seats of my pants, and there hasn't been a plan there, because I've been sort of the on the wrong side of a dot-com crash. I've had issues around, like I say, with geology. There was a big hiring freeze that affected the entire industry for 5 years. These are big epochal type events that on a personal level, they're epochal. You know, that you can do nothing about. You know, there's just no way for you to change how an industry is doing its hiring, or to, you know, solve the .com crash, or, you know, any of these other sort of issues that can happen. And you just have to roll with the punches. And that's been what a lot of it's been about, is just kind of, you know, the tide has changed and I've just had to swim in another direction. So, you know, in terms of role models, it's just been really, I've had more role models more recently because I've been reading a lot more about other women and what they've done. And so, you know, role models like Jianxun Wu, who was absolutely amazing woman. You know, they kind of come into play then, but it's, you know, in the early days, it was just kind of responding to external events and trying to make the best of whatever situation I found myself in.
Do you agree that no one tell us to get a mentor? Because honestly, in my 20s, no one told me. And actually, that's the best thing you should, actually, that's the most important thing you should do, to get a mentor, because they can actually make good suggestions.
Absolutely. I wish I'd had a mentor when I was in my 20s. The other thing that I wish I had known in my 20s was, I wish someone had taught me how to be a joiner. Now, I'm a bit of a loner, sort of personality wise. And, you know, through the pandemic, I've kind of been all right, because I'm a little bit of a hermit. You know, I have to, I'm an introvert, and I have to remind myself that I like going out. I like leaving the house. So personality wise, I've never really been somebody who joins groups or, you know, seeks that kind of fellowship out. And in retrospect, you know, that was an error. Yeah, as a 20 something, and even through some of my 30s, I would have been a much happier person had I found people who were like me, if I'd found my tribes plural, really. So yeah, I think, you know, find a mentor, and also kind of test drive different groups of people, you know, different tribes, and see where you really fit in. Because, you know, one thing I have now that I didn't have in my 20s is people around me that I can talk to, people that I can kind of go to and ask advice for, and it's genuinely transformative. I wish I'd known that when I was 20.
Absolutely. Actually, I'm going through this right now, like the concept of communities. Like if you have an idea, you can do as much by yourself, but if you find a community of people you can, you know, share with. I'm a big collaborator. Like I get super motivated by collaborating with people. Find those communities, and it's not easy, so you need to put some effort in. Anna, does your microphone work? I'm sure your video does not, but maybe your microphone works. We are not that lucky. Let's see. So we had one previous question from Lena about the, Suw, you said you're not very good at math, but yet you work in STEM. And then she mentioned the opening slide of the data school that we are looking for numerate people. More about the kind of math numeracy is needed in STEM and data visualization.
Yeah, so maths. So I think there's kind of three things really. There's maths, there's statistics, and there's numeracy. And maths, to me anyway, is kind of the I'm thinking of things like calculus. I'm thinking of, like, you know, circular functions and E and imaginary numbers and that kind of stuff, which is, I kind of struggle with a bit at school. The number E in particular just floored me. I just didn't understand it at all. I was pretty good at most of the other things. I was okay at calculus, but I didn't really enjoy it. And I think that was, it wasn't because of my teacher. My teacher was actually great. I mean, she was really, really good. Mrs. Gray, fantastic. I think it was more because there was just a lot of pressure on me as a girl to prove that girls could do maths, and when I started to have problems, my confidence collapsed. So I think, there's that, sort of classical maths, if you like. There's statistics, which I did at university and loved and was actually quite good at. Forgotten most of it now, but statistics is really about looking at numbers and looking at data and interrogating it. And that, I think, is actually more relevant to sort of data visualization areas. And then I think numeracy is a much more generalized thing. Numeracy is about not being scared of numbers. Numeracy is about being willing to stick your head into an Excel spreadsheet, which I love, by the way. I'm such a nerd when it comes to Excel spreadsheets. And
who doesn't love a good spreadsheet?
I know, who doesn't love a good spreadsheet? And being willing to actually get into the numbers and work with them. I think, to me, numeracy is much more about the basics of arithmetic, but it's also about an attitude. It's about a willingness to get your hands dirty with the numbers. All the stat stuff and any kind of complex math or whatever that you need to do, Bayesian statistics, all that stuff, you can learn all that. That's fine. If you have that, if you don't have the fear of numbers, right? If you have that confidence that numbers are something that you can manipulate and understand, then you'll be absolutely fine. Even if you don't have a big maths background, it's not a problem.
Yeah, to add on this, I think there are three types of people and attitude toward maths. So there are cool. There are the people which they're okay with math, but they don't say that they have a problem with math. They're just okay. And I think most of probably men fit in this. Women, although they're absolutely middle category, they say, I'm not good at math. It's not. Yeah. That's a conversation about able to study STEM and all those things that they tell us, which and stress that in our job and in data visualization, you don't need to be good at math. You need to not be scared of numbers. As you said, it's completely different conversation. You can have to deal with numbers at some point in spreadsheets and stuff, but you don't need to do regressions and all that because it's not a job. So yeah, there is I think a big misconception of and I think in this sector.
Yeah, it's really worth remembering that maths phobia is both hereditary and contagious. So if you have parents who think that they're not good at maths, they will pass the fear of maths on to their children. And if you are in a school or you are around people where, the teacher or other girls are saying that, girls aren't any good at maths, then, it is contagious. You will catch maths phobia off the people around you. And, if something is sort of, if there is this like social contagion around maths phobia, then that means maths phobia can be conquered. That means you can actually decide, okay, I'm going to get my head around this. I'm not going to be scared of it anymore. I'm just going to get on with it and learn it. And it's about attitude. It's about that kind of like, okay, I'm numbers are just numbers. And learning how to manipulate them and get them to tell you stories is a skill that can be taught and can be learned. There's, I think, sometimes this idea that you have to be naturally good at maths. Very few people have that kind of beautiful mind thing going on where they can just look at pages of equations and go, aha, I understand this. Most of us actually have to work at our maths. And that's fine. That's absolutely normal.
Yeah, but as you said, there's nothing that we can't learn.
Yeah.
As you said, there is a huge phobia on this, and it's definitely penalizing a lot of people. So yeah, unfortunately, Anna has some technical issues, but we'll have her for sure at the next event. We don't have any more questions, but yes, do you want to talk about, we already talked about finding Ada, but what about if people want to sign up to the platform? How does it work?
So the Finding Ada Network, so we are always looking particularly for companies to join us. So if you think that you would like to be a part of the Finding Ada network, or that your company would like to get involved, then you can email me, Suw@findingada.com. Let me just put that in the messages. And we are also going to be having another kind of open enrollment session in April. So if you follow us on Twitter at Finding Ada on Twitter, then you will see when we are going to open that new cohort. So we're going to do a 6-month program from May through to just for the end of the year. So if that's something where you want to get involved with that, then email me or just follow us on Twitter and keep an eye out for the announcements on that. The mentoring platform is very fully functioned. It's really good, actually. So basically, you create a profile, we match you with a mentor or a mentee, and then you get access to this structured program. So it will say to you, okay, you need to set up your first meeting, you need to set up a recurring meeting, you've got your 30-day check-in questionnaire, make sure everything's going all right. And so you actually kind of have these prompts that help you understand how to develop your mentoring relationship. We don't just kind of match you up and then, off you go and work it all out yourself. There is a structure there. And we also do, like I said, these webinars, which is good. We actually have a webinar coming up, which I've actually made open to the public as well. And that is with speaking coach Sarah Cruz, who is going to be teaching how to understand your audience perspective so that you can make better presentations, basically. So that one is open to the public, and tickets are £20 available from our website at findingada.com on our blog. And we've done that because I wanted to bring in some outside speakers for the webinars, and Sarah is so good, and I wanted to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to learn from her talk. So and we just have lots of content as well that people can look at, kind of everything from how to manage your to-do list through to how to relocate and those sorts of things. So lots and lots with the Finding Ada network. So if you're interested, drop me an email.
Yeah, so super precious stuff. Suw, thank you so much. And I want to speak with us about the Data School New York, please stick around. We're going to be on the little tables. Thank you, Suw, again. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody. It's been a pleasure.